Well, good afternoon, one and all. Good afternoon, Penny. Good afternoon, George.
Hello, kia ora, kia ora.
Kia ora koutou. Tēnā koe. I was laughing during that promo because we were conversing right before we started, and I was of the opinion that whilst I'm quite a trustworthy person, I struggle sometimes when you get fed information just before you do a live stream that you then have to not reference whatsoever in any kind of context. I had a mate when I used to play golf, right? This is my personality. I used to play golf, my mate Pete, and we were playing at the golf course out at Auckland Airport, and he hit the ball and it went into the rough, and the rough was kind of a bit of a ledge and a bit of a drop down, and it was in right beside a gorse bush, and he had to reach down and get his ball, and he couldn't get down, and he didn't want to jump down because he would have been in the gorse bush, so he leant over and he held, so his left hand was up to me, and he leant over and his right hand was down there getting the ball. And I started pissing myself laughing because all I wanted to do was let go of his hand and watch him fall into the gorse bush. Of course I didn't, but he turned around and looked at me and he went, "Don't you fucking dare." Because it was all that was in my head. There was a picture of me letting my mate go and letting him tumble into the gorse bush trying to get his. So I sometimes feel that way, but don't panic. I didn't let him go. I am trustworthy.
I mean, I don't mind it to an extent, but yeah, it's like when people say, "Don't push this button," you know, you're like, "What? Why?"
Yeah.
Or that experiment that they did where people thought they were electrocuting people, but that one is just like, Jesus Christ.
Yeah, that was based around people with authority figures, people in white coats with clipboards, what you can make them do, and it was all about, why did people follow along with the Nazis and that kind of stuff, and it was investigating that. And they found that a good proportion of people would keep increasing the electricity until basically they killed someone in the other room who didn't really get killed.
Yeah, but we just have to look at Russia and the United States to see that it doesn't take much to follow authority into oblivion.
Yeah. How about you, George? How you doing, mate?
Good. Yep. Nothing to report. Still just buzzing from Penny wasn't here yesterday, but Penny, I went to karaoke in the weekend.
Great.
So,
you usually do that?
No, but probably more often than people do. Usually after a weekend like that, I just feel really seedy for a week, and it's like, ugh. But something clicked, and for once, it was like I was young again and didn't get hangovers.
Oh my God, you're like 12 anyway.
Exactly. And
what's your favorite karaoke song?
Well, my go-to was the Prodigy, Breathe.
Right.
Yeah.
My go-to was I Touch Myself by the Divinals.
Yeah, well, you see, Pat has a nice one where he can use the range of his voice, and whereas mine is a lot more grunty and drunk.
Right.
George, I enjoy doing George, now would be the appropriate time to tell Penny about your punk band and what the name of your punk band was back in the day.
In high school, my punk band was called Up the Bum, No Babies.
Oh my God. Do you know what? Funny, my husband's cousin got that tattooed on her back when she was drunk in Spain, and it ended up a story on the Daily Mail. It was hilarious. He showed me this story, and I was like, "Oh, that's hilarious." And he went, "She's family."
Oh my goodness! And obviously, tattoo removal came soon after.
I'd say so, but they interviewed her father, and he said, "Well, I mean, it's a true statement."
And is this not your part or not your husband's part of this family, but is there a portion of this family that do marry their first cousins? Is that what we're talking about?
I couldn't possibly comment. Oh,
my lights just fell down.
Oh, your light. Yeah. No.
Here. Talk amongst yourselves for a second.
He's got delightful family members. You know that whole thing when you're worried about meeting your in-laws because you hear so many horrible stories and jokes, and they're just lovely.
Yeah. Oh, there you go.
That's
hey,
boring.
Interesting show today. We're going to be talking a little bit about. There was a story. There's a couple of stories on TVNZ and TV3 today that we're going to reference and have a look at and have a chat about. One of them was about a girl called, I think her name is Charlie Webby, who has got who got COVID quite early on, like 2 years ago, and still hasn't had her sense of smell or taste come back. We're going to have a look at that. We're going to have a look a little bit at Consumer New Zealand fighting for us and hopefully getting us helping to push the government towards regulation of the duopoly that is the supermarkets to help us all live a bit easier. And also Christopher Luxon was on Today FM this morning with Toba O'Brien and kind of talking about, the conversation is becoming fairly repetitive that one part is saying, oh, what are you going to do about this? And the other part is saying, we haven't got those answers yet. So it's a little bit about policy and should they have policy for their criticisms, and we'll have a bit of a look at that as well. But first of all, actually, what we're going to do, and I'm particularly looking forward to this, George, because of the comments that Penny made previous to us starting about how she wasn't a fan of Avatar, with the new Avatar preview, is what it's called? Trailer is out. I haven't seen it yet, and so we're going to have a look at it now and just see what it's like. You're sharing my screen there. Share what it's like, because I want to see, because I was a bit of a fan of Avatar. Penny not, and George, I think you used the word inspirational, George, prior to us chatting.
Well, I was taking the piss. I don't think I've ever seriously used that word. But here we go.
Let's have a look at the new Avatar trailer. It's only 90 seconds. Weta, of course, made in New Zealand. I'm really interested to see what it looks like as well, because it was pretty groundbreaking with this technology. Not talking about the storyline.
Yeah.
Is this the second one?
Yeah, the second one.
It's been a long time between blue drinks.
I do remember the rumors were it was going to be an underwater world, like it was an underwater Avatar. This doesn't look like that. So this is the first time I'm seeing this. So, okay, maybe there is. What's her name? She's from Guardians of the Galaxy as well, eh? Who plays the main part in this? She's green in one movie and blue in the other. The thing that works for the special effects in this is it's pretty much all special effects. Like it's all CG in there.
Mm-hmm. Is it Zoe Saldana?
Yeah, that's it. Yeah, Zoe Saldana.
This family.
Oh,
Is our fortress.
Yeah, it will get to the point where the actual live action human people will look like the uncanny, you'll get the uncanny valley effect from the real human people, and the animated people will look normal.
I Penny, you don't know this, George does. I watched over the last week the latest 3 Planet of the Apes movies, because I saw a thing about the technology and it made me interested. So I watched the 3 of them. It's the reboot. I think it was like 2011, 2014, and 2017, and they're on Disney Plus at the moment. So I watched the 3 of them, and even though the apes on that 99% of the time look amazing, there is that moment when the CG ape is interacting with the real life human that you can kind of go, okay, you can see that there's still a bit of a gap there. By 2017, though, it was looking pretty freaking good. So I'm quite intrigued to see the technology of Avatar. Obviously, it was groundbreaking when the first one came out, and how that all works. But what I noticed in Planet of the Apes, which is what I said about Avatar then, was when it was all chimps talking, or all, when it was just that CG world, it looked amazing. Like the apes looked amazing. But when they interacted with humans, and there was obviously some kind of work that had to be done between human, and that's when you saw a bit of a gap in the reality.
And it was 2009 it came out, so it's been a long time. Yeah, long time. And I just felt like it was like a million hours long. Oh, it was 2 hours 42. There we go. And I was like, oh, Jesus Christ. Like, I don't feel like anything should be that long. And I had some very cliched script, as I was saying before. I remember one line was like, I didn't sign up for this shit. And I was like, oh God, how many times have we heard that before? But
When you
Neither
said
did
that
I.
before, Penny, I thought you meant someone in the cinema theater said I didn't sign up for this.
I would have done that. I don't think I saw it in the cinema. I believe I saw it on the small screen, which I acknowledge would not have been as, because that was the whole thing, right? The visual impressiveness, but it just didn't grab me.
Yeah, but it's still got to be a story, doesn't it? I mean, I've always said I'd rather watch, the best. I'm sorry, I'm just fixing my lights at the time. The best movie in the world in SD on a black and white TV than the worst movie in the world because it had the best graphics. So it's still got to hold up in the
Like
storyline as well.
South Park movie, even though I don't know if that's aged very well, but with their wonderful animation, I was like, I nearly died of laughter when I went to see that. But I've you look back at bits of that now and you go, I don't think that's aged very well.
Hey, let's rip into some of the stuff we're going to talk about, shall we? I think we should do that.
It's 10
All
minutes.
right. So we are gonna. I mean, I know that COVID is a topic of conversation at the moment, funnily enough. But I think that one of the things that I have been looking at, and I don't know if you guys are the same, but it's the idea of where we're at right now, what we're being told right now, what's happening right now, how COVID's around still right now. I've long been a proponent of, I'm not going to jump into that court of, let's just get it, let's infect ourselves and get over it, especially now that we're hearing people are getting reinfected 6 weeks later. I mean, it seems what the advice is right now is that you're kind of a superhero for about 4 weeks, kind of. And then between 4 weeks or a month and 3 months, they don't really know. And then from 3 to 6 months, everybody wanes. And pretty much after 6 months, you're open to be reinfected, but it could be as early as 5 or 6 weeks. That's pretty much what the research seems to be showing at the moment and what a lot of the epidemiologists are saying. So still being in that camp of, I don't really want to get this thing if at all possible, this story popped up on TVNZ this morning, and I wanted to share it because this is about long COVID a little bit and about the effects of long COVID and what can come from it. So this is Charlie Webby. She was interviewed on TVNZ Breakfast this morning, and she has lost her sense of smell and taste, and it's been 2 years. Now you can go to obviously TVNZ, or I watch them on YouTube. They put some YouTube clips up as well, and you can have a look for the whole article for yourself. But the first part of the conversation, they were talking about when did they know that this sense of smell and taste being gone was a serious issue, because a lot of people have reported it, but not a lot of people have had it for 2 years. So when did she first realize that it was a quote unquote serious issue?
Well, I counted it in days at first. Every morning I would wake up in the morning, I'm like, can I smell the coffee? And I couldn't. And so I kind of did it in days. And there were other stories coming out of other people around England who had lost their sense of smell or taste. And I remember really distinctly, there was a guy who someone put me in touch with who had also lost his around the same time. And he was like, oh, it took me, 13 days for mine to come back. And I'm like, 13 days? I can't wait that long. And then it kept going days into weeks until I was measuring it in months. And I've just crossed my 2-year mark. So it feels never ending, and it may be never ending, but fingers crossed, we'll see.
So talk to us about how that presents itself. Are we talking literally nothing? No smell at all, no taste at all?
More or less, yes. So in the first 3 months, I think it was complete and utter in that I couldn't tell the difference between sugar and salt. I could eat a handful of chili flakes and not feel anything. I ate mustard powder. I licked soap. I did some bizarre stuff because it was complete and utter. And then after about 3 months, I could start to distinguish between sweet and salty, and a little bit of bitterness and sour sometimes, but no flavor at all. And that's remained. So I can't taste anything. And my smell, every now and again, I can smell something. So like once every week, I don't know, maybe one smell will get through. But that comes and goes as well. So at one point I could smell cut grass, but then that fades away again. At one point I could smell one brand of coconut milk, and that lasted for a few weeks, but then that went away again. So smell, every now and again, something will get through, but not for the taste, unfortunately.
Yeah, so she's painting a pretty bleak picture. I was also going to ask, is there at any point do we want to comment on what they call in the industry the noddies? I mean, the faces that are being pulled about, like, I mean, is that a commentary we want to talk about as well? I mean, we could do.
I mean, a noddy is different though, right? A noddy is what you've recorded so you can edit things in interviews. This is just
it's a cutaway.
Yeah. Maddie is a sweet man who obviously had a lot of empathy for this lady, and it oozed out of every pore when he was talking. Because I watched this morning as well, and he asked her some questions where you go, like, how did it make you feel? Which is always that good one. But then he asked her later on what she misses the most, and she was like, "That's a really cruel question." And she said it was all the bad things like chocolate and things like that she missed.
Yeah, we're going to play another clip in a minute from this interview, because I thought, if I stop and think about it, part of me kind of goes, what's taste really? What's smell really? But actually, when I really do put into it, I'm like, yeah, imagine when she talks about licking soap and it's like you could literally eat anything, which on some levels you kind of go, well, that could make life cheap. But on another levels you go, you would never enjoy putting something in your mouth again.
So to speak. Yeah, exactly. You just sort of go like, I mean, I love certain foods and the smell. I love the smell of flowers. I have a perfume I wear all the time. And I think I was reading an interview with her. It would have been her, I think, like a few days ago, and said that she just eats smoothies. So you think, it could be a good opportunity to lose some weight if you're just eating smoothies the whole time. But it just, and also it can sort of alert you to dangers, right? Smelling smoke. Smelling chemical smells, things like that she just doesn't have that anymore. Like she could inadvertently be sniffing something to make her pass out and things like that, like ammonia and stuff, and she just wouldn't have a clue. So I think, it can have some safety things too.
It actually makes me think, this is a strange connection, Penny, but stick with me. It makes me think about leprosy and what leprosy actually is. And for people who don't understand, or actually they've heard about it before in kind of stories from 2,000 years ago, but leprosy is actually where the nerves at the end of in your skin, they die. You can't use them. So therefore you can't feel anything. So often what happens it's not that their arms and stuff rot away and fall off because of leprosy. It's because they get a massive gash on their foot, which is still a thing today. Leprosy is still a thing today in some countries. And then it gets infected. And because of the infection, the foot might fall off, but it's literally, you can't feel anything. Yeah. So therefore you're talking about the smell and the sense of danger. It's the same for the feel. If you have, for people with leprosy.
I had a pinched nerve or some sort of nerve thing in my arm, and my fingers would be like pins and needles. And it's horrible. Just like this sort of heavy thing. So I'm getting an echo. Should I put headphones? Right. I was going to. And the other thing, it can be a symptom of menopause, pins and needles and things like that too. So that's something that can come from one of the 35 symptoms of menopause that a lot of people don't know about. But there was somebody that emailed into breakfast later on who said that they'd had the flu in 2013, a bad flu, and lost their sense of taste and smell for 3 years, but it eventually came back to about 67%. Wow. So she was like, fingers crossed, because she was very delightful. She was very upbeat. I'm sure she's had she's had 2 years to deal with it, which, but it's shit. But she was a very charming guest.
And let's actually look at a part of that, because Maddie goes on to ask her about her mental health. So like, like you and I are talking about it, and if you stop and think about not tasting anything for 2 years, I'm sure it would fuck with you. And so basically, he didn't say, how's this fucking with you, because it's TVNZ, but it's basically what he asked her, and her response was still, as you say, charming, and she's obviously dealt with it on some level. But yeah, there is a mental health toll for this.
Yeah, it is. I try not to dwell on that too much. Of course, I have spent, there have been many tears shed, because it is sad, just some of the stuff that I'm missing out on, like what I would do to smell a flower, or like walk down the street and smell the ocean. I live opposite the ocean now in this amazing property, and I can't smell the ocean. Like I can't go outside and smell the grass. I can't smell the coffee. I can't eat a meal that someone cooks for me. There's this whole element of my life that's been taken away, which, I try not to dwell on too much, especially now that we're at the 2-year mark and it's not looking all that great.
What have doctors said to you? Is there anything that can be done here, or is it just a waiting game and hoping that one day you'll get it back?
Yeah, that's about it. I went to a number of GPs and an ear, nose, throat specialist in England, and there are other ways that you can lose your sense of smell and taste, like head injuries and some other viruses. And so there's a lot of study on that. But with COVID, because it's very new, it's it's a lot of unknowns. So the general answer I got was wait and see, and that it should come back, but not great. And here in New Zealand, I've only been to the GP once because I just moved back recently. And again, there weren't any answers other than wait and see. But there's plenty of internet doctors that have some suggestions, but no legitimate ones so far.
There you go. So I was just a highlighting of it. I mean, I said to George before we started the broadcast, like, imagine living a life where you would want nothing more than to be able to smell a fart again. You know, like anything, like if you could smell anything, you'd be stoked. Like it would be like, oh, that's disgusting smell. Hey, I can smell. Oh my goodness, I can smell it. That would be so exciting. The worst smell in the world, if you could smell that today, it would be the most exciting moment of your week.
Yeah. Just that whole thing about the social aspect, like sharing a meal. I love going out and sharing a meal with people and going to a nice fine dine restaurant with my husband, just enjoying that whole thing. And this, and she had a 2-day COVID. That's the thing too. She had an incredibly mild COVID for about 2 days, didn't notice she'd lost her smell for about 3 days. And then that's it. And that's the terrifying thing. That's why I was reading another story today. A woman, she's got Crohn's disease. So when she got diagnosed with COVID, she managed to get Paxlovid immediately, which is the antiviral, and said she was testing negative within 3 days. And I don't know if this would make a difference because, again, this woman had a mild one, but it makes me really want to get some Paxlovid if I actually do get COVID, because I'm worried about long COVID for singing and dancing and things like that.
Is the Paxlovid the one that Pfizer's put out? Is that that's what it's called? I hadn't heard the name of it, Paxlovid.
Yeah,
is that the Pfizer cure, the so-called Pfizer cure?
Well, yeah, it's 86% effective at reducing hospitalization and death, which is pretty good.
Yeah,
which is pretty. There's a Merck one, which is called Molina something anyway, and that is only about 50% effective. And there's only been something like 13 doses of that given out, but about 1,600 doses of Paxlovid.
Yeah. Look, I mean, I know that people could be kind of getting to the end of the tether with this conversations, but I guess one of the things I'm really keen to do is just still sort of remind people this is still around. We've rallied on the show a couple of times about, what the government's done at the moment, showing the numbers aren't particularly good, showing things like Canterbury DHB at their, they had their most admissions 2 Sundays ago of any stage during the whole pandemic. And so I had a kid who had a kid in their class this weekend test positive, and so we're now going, hang on, what's my child? Should I give you an arms? This is how we're going to do this. What are we going to do? It's still around, and most people are saying their kids are bringing it into their house, and so for those of us who have got kids at school, it's like, what do you still do? This is not a safe thing yet. These fucking schools are saying we're not going to enforce mask mandates anymore. So it's still an ongoing conversation. And I guess because it's an ongoing conversation for me, as maybe selfish as this sounds, I want to keep talking about it because I know it'll be an ongoing conversation, at least for some people out there. And many groups aren't talking about it anymore.
And and that's why it was funny, because I have decided that people that come to my show at Q Theatre from the 25th to the 29th of May have to wear a mask. Do you like that? Olive copper bottom. So I was sort of waiting for a bit to see, but the numbers have totally plateaued and they're obviously just going to stay that way. So I was like, nah, I don't want to catch it, even though I feel like it's inevitability when I'm doing a shows, and I've already sold about 400 tickets. So that's a lot of people to come through, which is great. They added a show even. So that's cool. But yeah, I was like, no, I want it to be very clear that people can get a refund if they get COVID or I'm not even feeling well, and that everybody will be wearing masks. Oh, look at that. Very good. That's my the people talking about it at Circa. So I want people to be able to feel safer when they are there and stuff as well. And because you know what, we went away to a delightful little batch in Wairua last week. And I was looking at batches to stay. We were looking all over the place. I looked at the Coromandel, and there was one place that looked really nice. And I was like, what's your cancellation, policy if we were to cancel because we got COVID? And he went, well, I'd give you a 50% refund because we're going to have to share the hit. And I'm like, fuck you. I'm not staying at your place then. What do you mean share the hit? Why am I supposed to, I get where he's coming from, but I'm just going to give people a full refund if they've got COVID and they can't come to my show. We're not going to come to your batch. I'm sorry. So I'm only booking places that have a policy where they will refund you. Or we actually booked it the day before we went. So that's easier as well. But I was like,
Yeah.
nah.
How does that work from a refund point of view? Because there'll be some costs associated with that ticket. Do then you cover that cost, or does it like the ticket, like there's fees for getting the tickets, whatever that's called, like an admin fee? Do you cover that, or does
No, that will probably
cover that?
Same with all refunds. That the ticketing fee is not refunded generally with all refunds, so it will probably be. Yeah.
So if someone pays whatever it is, $6 or $8 for a processing fee, they'll still pay that, but they'll get there. You must be what, $1,000 a ticket or something like that?
That's
is that
right? Yeah, I'm like Tom Sainsbury. I'm $35 a ticket. $35 a ticket.
Cool, man. Well, I mean, we wish you best of luck with that. And I saw you when you were last in Dunedin doing, not this one. What did you do in Dunedin?
Promise and Promiscuity.
Right.
Which I'm doing in Shore in June. It's animals. Where else am I doing that? Oh, I think that's all I've got planned for that one at this point, but I will keep bringing it back because it's nearly 10 years. It's nearly got its 10-year anniversary. I've done it over, 500 times, maybe, something like that. And I've done this one over 200 times. So, yeah. It's 15 characters, this one, Dickens. So there's a lot more sort of prostitution and child murder threats than there were in the Jane Austen.
Because, like, I always think when I go and see a show, if only there was more child murder threats in this, that would be a better show for me.
It's very Dickensian in that way.
And you're obviously someone who's watched Bridgerton. I heard that the second series of Bridgerton was like the first series, but with less stairwell sex. Is that an accurate representation?
Oral sex on the stairs was in the first one. And I was like, I don't know. It's like when people compare it to Jane Austen, I'm like, well, they're wearing similar frocks. That's about it. Really, that's about it. But I watched it all in like 2 days. I just love period dramas. That's why I do them. I can see a poster and go, what's that for? Like I'm like a sort of a moth to a period drama flame.
What you do though with these, Dickens and Austen, are they more homages than they are? Like, do you have to do anything or pay any fees or get any permission to do these things that are akin to, as opposed to being literal scriptings of?
Why do you think I pick long dead peoples? No, like the show that I'm doing is Shakespeare. So no, he's had enough royalties. So it's in New Zealand. It's 50 years past the death of the author / musician / whatever when you have to pay royalties. In the States, certain people like Disney have bought things out so it's longer, and it's 75 years in some places. And that was the whole thing with the TPP. Actually, there was a lot of trying to bring it in line with various different things. But that's the other reason that I choose classical music as well, because long dead people. But things like Rachmaninoff wasn't that long ago. And you're like, shit. I think he died in like the 50s or something like that. But I could be wrong with that. And Prokofiev was also. You just sort of hear these classical composers and think, oh, that's like really long time ago, and some of them aren't. So I couldn't use some that I wanted. But that's why I've got Beethoven and Strauss and stuff like that in my shows.
Cool, man. Well, I hope the most of success and best of luck with it, and I'm sure you'll keep us informed as to what's going on when, and we can tell more people.
Yes.
Speaking of informing people and telling people about what when, Consumer New Zealand has started a petition, and the petition is to call on the government to take action against the high grocery prices. Got a couple of clips for us to have a look at with this morning. And the first one is from TVNZ's Breakfast Show, and it is specifically looking at what is the petition. Like, explain the petition to us, please. I believe this is the CEO from Consumer New Zealand.
Well, the Commerce Commission recently completed a market study into competition in the supermarket sector, and it was a really comprehensive piece of work that highlighted a whole lot of problems. And in summary, if you boil it all down, they said competition is not working well for consumers. Now that report is finished, the government has it in front of it and has the ability to take the recommendations that have been made and make some decisions about what happens in this sector. We see that New Zealanders are struggling with high food prices, and we want to give New Zealanders the chance to make their voice heard to the Minister of Commerce and Consumer Affairs as he considers what the next steps should be.
Okay, so if we look at what those next steps should be, how should the government go beyond the recommendations made in the Commerce Commission's market study and take real action, because this is what your petition is asking for, to take real action to promote competition and lower prices? So what do they need to do?
Well, we think the government needs to look at the wholesale grocery market. So the problem that the Commission identified is that there's a lack of competition. There's only 2 players in our supermarket sector. So to fix that, we need more players to come in. But no new entrant is going to come into this market to try and take on the existing supermarket giants if they can't rely on getting reasonably priced supply of wholesale groceries at on a fair deal. At the moment, the existing supermarket giants have got all of the wholesale supply tied up. So any new entrant would need to rely, I guess, on the benevolence of the existing supermarkets to supply them on reasonable terms. Any rational commercial actor is going to say, no, we're not going to spend the millions of dollars required on those terms because we just couldn't rely on the supermarkets keeping that supply line open. So we're asking the government to step in and intervene in that wholesale market. So either enter as a wholesaler itself, so a state-owned wholesaler, or to regulate the wholesale market, to write a rule book that legally requires the supermarkets to supply other competitors on fair terms.
So there you go. I'm fascinated by a couple of things. The first is a state-owned wholesaler. Imagine that. I mean, we hear so much about competition and fair competition, and that the government shouldn't get involved in business, etc. But if we look at what would be best for the citizens, that's a pretty interesting conversation to be had. One thing I'm unclear on, and if we had Consumer New Zealand with us today, maybe George in the background can have a look at this and see if we can find an answer, is when they talk about the duopoly at the moment having the wholesale process tied up, are they just saying that the current two providers of the supermarkets buy everything that wholesalers are providing, or are they actually in that chain as well? So progressives, are they in the, because you know how some companies will own something and then sell it to themselves? Are they in the wholesale market? So that's a bit unclear to me as well, because just because you've tied up the wholesale market doesn't mean another person can't come in and try and get a wholesale contract off that person. So that's a little bit unclear for me.
Yeah, I mean, there's all their own brand stuff, obviously, too, right? So, like, is that something to do with that? I don't know. Yeah, I'm not 100% sure, but yeah, I signed that. I got that into my inbox this morning before I turned on the television, and then I watched that. And then they both refused to come on breakfast to talk to them about it, but Countdown sent in a thing saying, it's unfair to say that the entire inflationary cost of living is down to the supermarkets. And it's like, at no point did Consumer ever actually say that. They just said that $1 million a day excess that they are making, that was determined to be so in that report, is a little excessive. And we just always have this in New Zealand. I mean, I hate monopolies / duopolies. I live in the licensing trust area in West Auckland that I believe I've said before, I hate with the passion of 1,000 burning suns, because monopolies always have higher costs and less choice, and therefore are not forced to be innovative, etc. And it's very annoying. Costco, it'll be interesting to see if Costco has any effect in the Auckland market when it opens. It'll be interesting to see, because their petrol is already way cheaper than everybody else's petrol. Yeah.
George obviously has found something for us.
Well, just calling back to the Commerce Commission thing, which is kind of how we started this conversation a few weeks back. One of their main findings was that, when it comes to the duopoly, one of the huge problems with getting competition in there is that they do dominate the not only wholesale part, back end of it, but also the distribution as well. So you're right in your question, or rather, yes is the answer to the question. They do dominate that back end side of things. And also, as we heard the other day, when it's not themselves supplying to themselves, they've already worked out in 3-month blocks the price of goods. And so that was one of the reasons why the freeze on prices was a bit of a non-thing, because it really hadn't even affected Countdown's costs. But yeah, answer to your question is yes, they dominate the back-end distribution and supplying.
I think it's important to reiterate this phrase that you just used, Penny, which is in the report and which everyone's talking about, is the $1 million of excess profit. So they're not making $1 million profit a day. They're making $1 million above and beyond a good profit. So it's excess profit. Now, if it was, your local car dealer selling European cars, and if that European car was twice as much in New Zealand as it was in Sydney, but people still bought them and they made an extra $1 million a month that they needed to, it's not an essential for life to buy that particular car from that particular area. Whereas food, I heard this rumor that food is kind of this thing you can't really do without.
Just a little bit. Yeah.
And so when you've got a market that you have to adhere to, you have to be involved with, that's when the conversations around fair and money and excessive profits become a valid part of the conversation.
When I lived in the UK, I know that, again, there's the economy of scale, obviously, but it was so cheap. So cheap. You could buy, this was in late 90s, but you could buy a can of like spaghetti for 6p. Like I would buy food for a week. Yes, I worked in a restaurant, so I had quite a few nights of food, but I bought a week of food for £10.
Wow.
And, like when I've gone back there now and looked, it's still, and they're screaming and complaining there right now, but it's still so much cheaper than it is here. Australia is so much cheaper than it is here. And it's because we have a lack of competition. If only we could get convince Lidl to come over, and Aldi and people like that, but we're too small a market. And so as a result of that, we shouldn't be shafted because we enjoy living in the country that we do.
Yeah, I think it was Elwood was with us last week, and he had a really interesting idea, because the other conversation is GST off essential food or food. And his idea was, I don't know if it's his idea, but the idea he shared was GST off New Zealand produced food. I was like, oh, that's an interesting thought. I mean, there'd be some gray area between for some products, but if it's a product that's growing down the road from you, I mean, there's always that conversation is, why am I paying more for the milk that's produced 5 k's from where I live as opposed to what they pay in Perth, for example? Those kinds of conversations.
I loathe that. And, this whole thing that we have to compete on a global scale, I just find that just infuriating. Like, the fact you can get Oyster Bay wine so much cheaper in the UK a lot of the time than you can get it here. And when you think about those air miles, etc., it sort of does my head in. I'm not so sure about the variable GST thing, though. Like in the UK, where they have VAT on some things or not others, it just gets confusing and messy. Like, I don't know if there was an entire lawsuit against, is a Jaffa cake a biscuit or a cake? Because one was luxury and one wasn't. And so then it was this huge big court case and all this sort of shit. So, there would be lots of grey areas. How many ingredients that are made in New Zealand would you qualify for it to be made in New Zealand? Do you know what I mean? Like, I just think
the difference between New Zealand made and New Zealand assembled, and we kind of talked about that with but they figured out a way to put that little Kiwi thing on it for New Zealand made and other products. I just think it was an interesting way to make us maybe potentially buy New Zealand made. Like if you go into the supermarket at the moment and you've got mandarins from, I don't know if they do mandarins in New Zealand, peaches from Central Otago, or you've got peaches from let's say California, and they're the same price, then for most people there may be no difference as to which one they pick. I mean, others will go because of the air miles and stuff, they'll take the New Zealand ones anyway. But if there was straight away an advantage because there was a New Zealand product there, it might also drive more people to buy New Zealand items and save them some money along the way. Perhaps. I thought it was an interesting idea.
It's an interesting idea, but then of course that money that's generated by that is then taken out of the tax system as well. So that's another point.
Completely. Let's go on. This conversation was raging on both channels this morning. TV3, the AM show, talked a bit about it as well. And it was interesting because they actually talked about a really specific issue. Apparently TV3 got a message from someone this morning talking about at Countdown. Countdown is the place that's put these price freezes on. Well, I think one of the reasons they're going to pay for any price freeze loss leaders, if there is such a thing, is with their new pricing for butter, because a thing was sent into TV3 for an $8.50 pound of butter at a Countdown. And let's have a look at how that conversation went. So this is another person from Consumer New Zealand as well.
Right. Yeah, so $8 is a huge amount to be paying for a block of butter. The warehouse does stock some essential items like butter and milk. And
sorry, I left a bit out. And they said, why would you buy $8 for butter when you could go to the warehouse and they're currently only $4? So that was the start of this conversation.
Yeah. Their pricing is really competitive. I guess the thing about the warehouse is there's a limit on how much you could buy. So I think it might be 2 blocks of butter per person. You can't do your entire shop there, and their supplies probably wouldn't be able to, accommodate if everyone was rushing to the warehouse to buy butter.
Right. Okay. So the price might not be sustainable long term, depending on how many people are shopping there, of course. Tell us about the petition that you are launching today.
So
I think we'll leave this part of the conversation because that was just covered off very well by the CEO.
I'm obsessed by her arms. She looks like she's
Yeah, I
got
know.
brown arms.
I kept looking at them thinking, man, she's got some pretty cool tats on her arms, but it's a pretty cool top she's wearing. I was going to play this bit, but the CEO just explained very clearly what the actual petition was about, so we won't do that second part. But there was another part of this conversation talking about international prices. The question was asked, how do we compare to Australia? And this was the response from Consumer New Zealand.
Yeah, so I think it's undeniable that there are reasons for why the price of food is going up, but what the Commerce Commission established was those profits. So really to have those profits on top of the high prices that we're paying is a bit of a slap in the face. I'm sure people may have seen recently in the media, someone did a shop from overseas, and it was much cheaper. In Australia, the cost of food is a lot cheaper, and the reason is that there's more competition. When the introduction of a third player, Aldi, came in, prices went down a lot. So if you're going to be shopping across the ditch, you're going to find that your weekly supermarket shop is a lot cheaper.
So they're putting it straight to competition. Yes, Penny.
And the wages are a lot higher. So
yeah.
So it's funny. I was watching something and I was looking on the ABC and there was a big article about how overworked the healthcare system is and they don't have enough people and they're not paid enough. And it's just like, man, it's just the same everywhere. But it's different, scale starting point, I guess, because they make a lot more money over there in the health system. But it's still beleaguered and under-resourced.
Some comments that have come in. Crazy Old World says Costco opens in September 22. I guess that's the 22nd year, this year, September, in Auckland. All that will happen is grocery prices will go up outside of Auckland to cover the competition. You heard it here first.
I doubt that very much.
I'm wondering what cost. Maybe it's obvious to everybody, but it's saying that so New World and those things will compete with Costco in Auckland and drop their prices.
However,
and those prices will go up elsewhere.
I know, but I just don't see, like, for the, yes, I'll try this all again. Costco is very specific, and then you can get like a bucket of peanut butter, and you can get like, these sort of huge items and things like that. So it's kind of a different model that way, and you have to be a member. But I went in once, and it's so crazy. It's enormous. I actually started laughing. It's just so big. This was in San Diego, and I just couldn't get over, how cheap it was and just how enormous it is. But I don't think that Costco is going to make prices go up in the rest of the country because I am a very qualified economics person with my BA in classics and drama. But I just can't see that would be, from one shop in Auckland, regardless of how big. Yeah, it's enormous. Look at that. And you can get TVs, like a TV is going to go up everywhere else in the country. I don't think so. You can get all sorts of shit at Costco. It's crazy. Yeah, it's not very finder friendly. Like you have to find somebody and like get a forklift and stuff like that because it's so big. And aesthetics aren't their bag at all. And it's funny because some people have been complaining, people that exploit people coming and opening shops here, but Costco is consistently voted one of the best employers in America. It has really good packages and things like that and healthcare packages and stuff in America. I don't know what they'll be doing here, but it is actually a really good employer. So that's something to note as well. And
that's all food that we're looking at, basically.
Yeah, well, but yeah, you can get TVs and all sorts of shit there. I was there and meat. My friend goes there to get her meat a lot of the time, and another friend loves their mayonnaise, which is literally the size of my head, like a bucket of mayonnaise and all this sort of stuff.
There was I'm not sure what it is, but there was a similar thing to that in Mount Roskill in Auckland for a while, because I used to go there with my mum. We used to have to be a member to go into it, and it actually is a place that supplies a lot of shops.
Gilmore's.
Gilmore's. Yeah, that's what it was. So why hasn't Gilmore's therefore taken off? Why isn't Gilmore's our Costco?
Gilmore's is a wholesaler, right? It's for dairies. It's sort of the back end for those sorts of places. I think that's where dairies mainly get their stuff. So it's it's one step back. It's for industry. You have to be a member, and it's an industry member thing.
Yeah, but if it's the same place we're talking about, we used to go. My dad sold life insurance. We weren't part of a dairy, and we used to go along to the location in Mount Roskill and by where the bus depot is, if anyone knows that part of the world. And we used to go there and get stuff. So it sounds like that scheme or that idea has been in New Zealand for a long time. Why hasn't that taken off? I wonder.
Yeah, I don't know. But Gilmore's really is a supplier generally. So I don't know what I don't know what the criteria to be a member was, but that is basically their MO.
they're probably Catholic owned, and it's the Old Boys Network slid one into my dad's DMs, whatever that was in the 1980s. What was their dad's DMs in the 1980s? I don't know. Sent him a letter.
If you're a business or a club, I'm just looking it up. Anyway,
probably club, because that's the Catholic Old Boys Network. Maybe it was that. I have no idea, but maybe that's the case.
That's it. If you're a business, club, not-for-profit, charity, or other organization.
There you go. So we just rode that wave. Some specifically about some of the places you've been talking about, like Lidl. There, it's a shame, says Simon, because I would love to see Aldi and Lidl in New Zealand. When I used to live in the Republic of Ireland, and they lowered their prices of food, those German supermarket chains. So so people calling out.
Absolutely. Yeah, when they hit Australia, it made a huge difference. And also I've got some friends who specifically love certain items that you can get, like crackers and various different things from those places that they love. Like my friend was in Christchurch for a while and was just consistently sad that he couldn't get his particular treats.
The other thing about this is, because purely of our population, I mean, full respect to people living in Auckland, when 40% of the population, 30, well, maybe less than that, 30% of the population live in Auckland. If you are going to get these things come along, they will turn up there. They will never come to places like Dunedin or Tauranga, or maybe not even Hamilton or Wellington, maybe Christchurch. You know what I mean? So it's a solution for our biggest city, which, like, more power to you, but it's not going to be a solution to the country.
I know, though, because Aldi is all over Australia, I know that they're obviously bigger population bases and stuff, so it's not necessarily a given. Like IKEA, that's not going to go around the country probably. I figure we're going to get some IKEA tourism. I fucking love IKEA. I also went to IKEA in San Diego. I did a tour of big box stores in San Diego. IKEA was like, I'm going to go and look at that safely, obviously. And I was just angry at how cheap everything, like literally angry. I'm like, this mirror is only $20. Fuck you. And like, you believe how cheap it all was. But obviously it's like horrible consumer consumption and, again, economies of scale and the wastage and shit. But
but also the American thing, and I had this sort of revelation the other day, within the last year or so, as I watch a lot of renovation shows, and I see them kind of converting a house. Like I watched one yesterday where they converted the whole house for $130,000. I've been quoted $50,000 just to put a bathroom in downstairs, and they basically made it a new house.
I can probably talk to you about your $50,000. You might were you trying to move too much plumbing around or something?
There's probably a part of it. There's nothing there at the moment, so it needs to be all put in there.
All right, there we go. My first quote to do a bathroom was $36,000, and I got it down to 21 because.
Well, let's talk. But the point I was going to make is, when you watch that and you go, oh my God, why do we pay so much? But then you have to actually also be aware that in many of these places there's no minimum wage, that the people who are doing it are probably not earning very much. And one of the reasons you typically pay a lot less in other countries, one of the contributing factors, is the amount of money that the people servicing those things are getting paid as well. So I would love to be able to have a much cheaper outcome, but I also don't want people to be struggling, like the hammer hand or the builder or the whatever, to be struggling because in that part of the world they're getting paid 3/5 of fuck all.
Yeah, but I also think it's the supply of the product and the materials. That's the thing that adds the prices here, it seems to me. And I hate because I like things that are a bit interesting and a bit quirky. I have an eclectic taste. And Jesus Christ, we have such boring options. Like you go to these, like for handles or for lights. Oh my God, the lights options in this country are so tedious. Like I ended up making a light with things I got at like this sort of, I've got lights that hang down from the ceiling that look a bit like this one. You can't really tell. Anyway, this is white at my face the whole time, so I look like I don't have any wrinkles. But yeah, I just get really sick of the lack of options that we have here as well. But I also love home renovation shows.
Yeah, I watch them a lot. I watch my favorite at the moment is one called Hometown. Hometown as a husband and wife, and he looks like me a bit, and she's this little blonde-haired thing, and he's the builder and she's the designer. And
I don't like HGTV. I prefer Australia and English ones. Like Love It or List It Australia is the absolute pinnacle to me.
No, Love It or List It Vancouver is the best one.
I can't stand that fucking Kenny. Fuck Kenny. Get the fuck out of here, Kenny. I hate Kenny. And it's so fake, so staged. I can't stand it.
Is it the Vancouver one? There's one just called Love It or List It, which obviously was first, where he's got a really whiny woman who's, I think, got a British accent. I don't like that one.
Yep. I know. I watch them all, but she irritates me so much. But Kenny who comes in and goes, oh, I don't know, it's going to cost $4,000, which they obviously knew before they started. I hate that.
Hometown. You should check it out. And I always look at Hometown, and I think I can always tell people that I'd get on well with. Hang on, I'll bring it up.
Okay.
And I'll tell you why. Here. I always people that I'd get on well with, and because I look at this couple, and I go, this is the couple who host it, and I go, I bet you her favorite superhero would be Fat Thor. And I like people, I personally, I don't know why, but I like people whose favorite superhero is not Thor, but Fat Thor. I feel a kindred spirit with those kinds of people.
I don't even know who Fat Thor is, so that's funny. That's like, I'm so not into superheroes. I don't know. They look nice.
Yeah, it's a fun series. I like it.
So
Anyway,
HTV?
Yeah, but I watch it online. I just watch it when it comes up on my various feeds. But you probably can find it on HTV. In fact, no, you can, because I thought that's what I saw one of these Fat Thor.
It's Fat Thor. Far out.
Thank you, George. Have you not seen this? He had an amazing. That's what's it? Yeah, but like they did it where every hair and every mole and every freckle was put onto the fat suit for this part. So it was amazing. So yeah, that's Fat Thor.
Wow. My friend Jeff Dolan played Thor full stop in The Almighty Johnsons. So another Thor for you there as well. But Chris Hemsworth, that's it, isn't it? That's him.
Yeah.
It's quite dishy.
Dishy. It looks better as Fat Thor, in my opinion. No, I don't know why I think that, but I just think it's a good look, particularly good look.
I don't agree with you there, so never mind.
Hey, let's have a look at our favorite subject matter, which is Christopher Luxon talking to Tova O'Brien. So Chris Luxon, and there's a good conversation to be had about this, and I'm sure George might want to jump in on the end of this, because we've had an ongoing conversation on the show about what does an opposition party need to offer back to the population when they're criticizing a government. Is it okay for an opposition party just to go, this is what I think, and have nothing to back it up? Or if they're going to criticize a specific issue to do with the government, do they need to be able to back it up and show their workings, as we used to be told in maths? Show your workings, National, and tell us how they're going to make it better. So one thing they're saying is you suck. Okay, fair enough. But why are you better? They don't seem to be doing that so much. Now, that might be okay for an opposition party, or we might want and expect them to actually provide solutions as well. So we have the absolute brilliant example of this from this morning on Today FM with Tova, where I personally, in my honest held belief, you can hear Christopher Luxon using the idea or the lines that his advisors have given him. See if you can pick up on it in this first clip. Tova asked him specifically about the home price gaps grant. So if there is a dollar figure of home prices, you can get a grant if you're a first home buyer to a certain level. And that home price is about $625,000 at the moment. You can get a grant if you're a first home buyer. Of course, for many people around New Zealand, that doesn't touch the sides of buying their first home. And so Tova's asking him, will you raise that level? So from 625 to whatever, 8, 9, 10 million, whatever it's going to be. And this is the interaction between them for that.
Look, I'm not going to go into policy detail with you today, Tova, but what I can tell you is the principles by which we're looking at this budget are pretty clear. Are we going to get relief for the squeezed middle? Are we going to see better outcomes for the amount of money being spent, which is a huge amount of extra money? And actually, are we going to get good line by line sort of value for money and good outcomes?
On the first home grants, if you're buying an existing property in Auckland, you can only get the grant for a house that's under $625,000. I think the average house price in Auckland is $1.5 million. Would you lift that cap? That seems like a no-brainer, right?
Tova, I'm just not going to go there today. I'm not going to discuss policy by policy with you. We're going to have a pretty comprehensive policy set for the election. But what I can tell you really clearly,
it's more than pretty comprehensive.
No, it's going to be very comprehensive. Don't you worry. But what I'm saying to you is what I'm more concerned about is what is this government doing to really address the cost of living crisis that's before us today? And what we really need to see is relief for the squeezed middle.
Totally.
Meaningful income relief.
But you understand.
We need to see a huge amount of value for money for the spend. I mean, we're spending $52 billion more than we spent in 2017.
I hear you, Christopher Luxon. I hear you.
$128 billion.
But you've got to present an alternative. So what about working for families? Would you lift the earning threshold
and then it goes on to more specifics and more issues. And he constantly comes back to, I'm not talking about policy. I don't know if he says I've got no policy, but I'm not here to talk about policy. Now,
I'm here to talk about the squeezed middle.
Yeah. Now, one of the things, and hopefully everyone else picked up on it, the interesting thing, and I wrote it down as he said it, is he says, what I'm more concerned about is, so Mr. Luxon was asked, what are your solutions to this issue? He goes, I'm not talking about that. What I'm more concerned about is how shit Labour is. He actually used the words, what I'm more concerned about. So at the moment, the National Party, the opposition party, their biggest concern is to try and paint a narrative. Now, I'm saying paint a narrative because it may or may not be true. I'm not even interested in getting to that. We're talking about how it's being communicated. Their number one priority at the moment is to sow dissension in the community as to how Labour is performing, not to offer solutions. Because he said it. What I'm more concerned about. And then he went on to talk about the squeezed middle. So, Penny, do you want to jump in before we play the next bit?
This is just what I hate about, I've said this before, but what I hate about adversarial democracy is that the media always have equal time to the opposition whose only job is to criticize. So then half of every media thing is negative spin on what the government is doing. So it's always being attacked. And often just for the sake of it. I don't blame him for not saying, we are going to do this, because it's not for quite some time. And if he did do that and then they didn't, Tova would be screaming about flip-flops from the roof. And it's a long time away to actually have concrete policy like that. But when you're constantly complaining that they're spending too much and we're going to cut this much spending, but you will not say what you will cut, then you're full of shit. You know what I mean? It's like to say we will raise this, but you say we're going to cut this much spending. So obviously you've done some work on a budget, but you can't say what that is. So that's bullshit. And I hate negative for negative's sake, but that's what we get with adversarial democracy, and it does my head in.
It feels to me a little bit like, you imagine, so like what National's trying to do at the moment is attract us to them. They're trying us being the population, the public, to them. And it feels a little bit like you've started this new relationship. You're getting to know this person. You know, when you get to that point of commitment, i.e. voting day, it's only then you find out that they've got a $3 million overdraft that they owe the bank. And there's a bunch of details about my relationship with you, which are not currently being talked about, which are actually the things I want to know about you. Right? I can't wait till I'm about to fall in love with you to then find out how terrible your credit score is, or how many kids you've got. Well, you know what I mean? It needs to be there now. I need to have the full picture now if we're going to have a relationship. And what we're getting is going, oh, you know your ex? Fuck, they're awful. Don't you know you should hate your ex? I'm much better than that. Why are you better? You'll find out. You'll find out.
But they don't actually have access to any of the information and books and stuff, do they, when they're in opposition? I will say that for them. So they don't actually know their complete situation until they get into government, which is another shit thing. So, you know, but if you say you are going to cut X billion dollars, I mean, like, you know, ACT came out with their fucking ridiculous budget, and they can easily make big, bold claims because it is never going to happen.
Yeah, of course.
You know, and that's the thing about it, that David Seymour is just like, oh my God, I mean, he is like the Grinch that stole Christmas. You know, he's going to cancel public holidays, all this sort of shit. But he's written it all down. But I don't know. I feel like you absolutely need some more policy than that. And I'm so sick of just all the negativity. And Matthew Hooton was on Breakfast today being a dickhead as well. So you know, it's like if they do something about law and order, then they're just it was also what Dominic, I was going to say Cummings, that's not his name. Benedict Collins, close. Benedict Collins was saying, oh, this is a total reaction to the crime. You know, this is them covering their bases. I'm like, this is them reacting to what is happening with some policy, you know, and then Matthew Hooton says, oh, this is them dropping their COVID be kind message. It's like, what the fuck is all this nonsense? I'm just, so sick of it.
Let's go on to the next part of this conversation, because even though you say, on some level, you say it's kind of fair that they don't have all the answers. Yeah. What the conversation we've been having on this show is that if they get into specifics and make specific criticisms about specific issues or even dollars, and the example that we've given often is when Mr. Luxon maybe was talking to Tova actually about how, you know, under this government, rents have gone up by $50 a week. So he has invoked a dollar figure. So it's very, very clear and fair to ask back, well, what would your government reduce rents by? To which he didn't have an answer. So I kind of feel when they're being quite specific about policy and quite specific about negative outcomes, then that's a perfectly good time to expect them to have some positive or at least their perspective on how they would change it. Nicola Willis made a speech yesterday, and she made some specific claims which sort of makes those questions around the house price gap and working for families relevant, because she called them out. She used some of those examples specifically in her speech as to why this, you know, basically saying why they'd be a better government in 18 months.
They don't receive any of the finance minister's so-called targeted help because they earn too much to be eligible for a benefit, working for families payment, accommodation supplement or similar. Many feel taken for granted by a government that seems to suggest they're too rich to deserve relief.
That's a really strong criticism. Kiwis feeling taken for granted by a government that thinks that they're too rich to deserve any relief, and yet you can't provide any solutions or offer them any alternatives.
No, I can. Toba, we've talked about the solution for many, many months now, which is we're saying, look, if you're in the squeeze middle and you're, say, earning above $55,000 to $80,000, you've got a good job, but you've got an average income, you're struggling to get ahead. It's the teachers, it's the nurses, it's the engineers, it's the couple that came up to me in botany the other day talking about how difficult it was. The biggest thing we could do for them right now, what Grant Robertson could do right now, in the spirit of wanting to propose a great idea, a sensible idea, just inflation-adjusted taxation thresholds. It's very, very simple. Take all those thresholds up by the amount of inflation the government's created in the 4 years they've been in power.
Okay, let's just pause it there. In his conversation, Mr. Luxon's conversation with Jack Tame got him to admit that his changes to the threshold and tax would do exactly the same for inflation as to what he is accusing the government of now doing inflation.
Yeah,
so this might give more people money in their pocket, but it will not affect the inflation situation we're currently in. Go, Penny.
I think I heard Cameron Baggery talking about that, saying, yeah, if we get more money into the economy, it will then push inflation up further. So, and also, didn't Luxon not actually know what the tax thresholds were as well?
I don't know. I know he didn't know what he was going to get back, apparently.
Yeah. Though, I mean, I do feel sorry for them sometimes too, when it's like, do you know what the tax rate was on the 12th of February, 1956? Yeah, you didn't, stuff like that. Obviously, the tax thresholds now is a little different, but sometimes I feel the gotcha sort of thing is quite tedious as well.
But this is what we're talking about. Like, is insisting that they answer the question about working for family, is that a gotcha? Whereas, like, so what is one stage on a bus ride cost? That's a gotcha, because that makes them look like they don't know and it's not relevant. But the point is, I guess, is making the relevant point. If you make the comment that rents have gone up by $50 a week, then it's relevant to go, how much would you reduce them by under your government? Yeah, so it makes sense. So that's why I'm saying, I think we got to think about when it's okay to drag them kicking and screaming to an answer, and when it's not okay to go, so Mr. Key, what's a bottle of 2-litre Anchor milk worth?
Yeah. I just do get frustrated too that if things changed, everyone's accused of being a hypocrite and flip-flopping when nobody ever takes into account the change of circumstance sometimes too, regardless of who's in government. So I do get a little sick of that as well. But no, I agree. Like, because he's been banging on for ages about cutting spending, but not what he'd actually cut. So that seems a little, yes.
So I guess when you hear Act's proposed budget, at least as ridiculous as it is, they've said what they're going to cut, and mostly it's making tens of thousands of people unemployed.
Yeah, 18,000, 14,000, something like that. Yeah, he's such a fucking, good one. Go twerk elsewhere. The man that, I know I've said this before, I think, called Jacinda the world's first Instagram prime minister while he was busy twerking on Dancing with the Stars. Go fuck yourself.
I like Terada. He said it here on the show, but also I think I've seen him tweet it recently as well. He just tweeted out, why does ACT hate New Zealand so much?
Yes, he did. I saw that. Oh, and the other thing I hate the condescension as well. Like, I saw some of Nicola Whistle's speech and just the dripping with condescension. It's another thing with the AM show, actually. They had this woman on the AM show who called Chloe Swarbrick student politics. And it's so condescending, ageist, dismissive, fucking misogynist as well, to be honest. Like, with her silly little student politics and stuff like that. So the condescension is very annoying. Excuse me, who was just deeply condescending to David Seymour. I'm a hypocrite as well, all right? I'm a hypocrite.
Let's wrap up this conversation this morning, because I think this is probably something you and I have talked about recently. It's something that'll float your boat a little bit. They were talking about public transport and the public transport subsidies. Yes. And Tova was asking, would he, keep those instated? And this is just 60 seconds or so of that.
Well, listen, let's see it. We said we supported the fact that we were taking, half-price subsidies for public transport, I think, for a 3-month period.
Do you want it longer, though?
3 months, see how they've actually performed. Well, until we see the results and the outcomes. This is the problem with this government. They think spending...
Okay, we can pause this already. I've got more to play, but we can see let's see it. Let's see the results. Okay, let's see the results.
Yep.
Auckland public transport numbers highest since August 2021. More than 200,000 passengers a day in the work week ending last Friday, which hadn't been achieved since last August. Last week's numbers were a 51% increase on the final week of March, the last before the government policy halved fare prices came into play. So there you go. Yeah. We have results, and I know you'll be wanting to chime in on this, Penny, but let's just finish this clip first, and then the floor is yours, my friend.
And announcing money actually is getting it done, and it's just not. You've just seen it on truancy, you've just seen it on mental health, you see it on education, you see it on a whole range of topics.
And just finally, Chris, just finally, you said this on our show last month when I asked you if you were going to scrap the fuel excise completely.
We'd be supportive of what we've been doing on fuel tax right now. We want to continue that.
So you want to continue that fuel tax cut. Would you keep it in place forever, ever?
I'm not sure about that. I think there's a point right now we're saying, there's a massive cost of living crisis going on. People are feeling squeezed. We're supportive of the two initiatives, which is the fuel.
Have you picked the word yet that the advisors have used? Squeezed, yeah.
Excise, being cut for a period of time. We're supportive of public transport for a period of time. Let's review, see how effective, how helpful they've actually been.
Okay, I look forward to seeing.
That's it. That's the end of the conversation. So, Penny, have at it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, I agree in the way, to try and press him to have his policy in place right now for what's going to be in the future. Again, as I said, that's irritating. But we have seen the results, and I think I heard the numbers of how much it cost to fund the government's 50%, and it was fuck all. It was really not very much. And I think it's an incredibly important thing. And I would love them to keep it in place. It'll be interesting to see, because that's the main problem. They were talking about the congestion charge potentially on breakfast today, because again, the government hasn't said they're going to do it, but they were debating it at length anyway. And a lot of people were really complaining about the fact that the public transport's a bit shit. And, it is, but they're investing in it. They've just opened the Albany busway, which will make a really big difference for the people on the North Shore. The busways on the North Shore are great. We just need some more of that sort of shizzle around the place. But yeah, and I mean, I think they will. It's going to be very interesting when they add that tax back on the petrol. I believe that will be quite an unpopular move. So they may have made a lot back there. So particularly because it's already nearly at $3 anyway. So what's going to happen with that, I think, is going to be a pretty tricky thing. But I do think, as I've said to you before, we have to pay. It's going to be expensive, but it has to be done. It has to be done. And I was saying to you that you was talking about public transport isn't necessarily the answer, but it's all the answer. It's all the answer. We've got to do all of the things: e-vehicles, e-bikes, cycleways, public transport, to try and encourage people out of their cars.
The government estimated the increased subsidies would cost between 25 million and 40 million for the 3 months to June 30th. Yeah. So let's split the middle. That's going to be about 33 million. So that's $11 million. That's $11 million a month, give or take. So 11 million bucks. So can I ask a really random out there question? Let me just ask this as I get my little calculator out. So if it's $11 million a month, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. So if we times that by 2, that would be 100% subsidy. If we times that by 12, $264 million for free public transport for everyone all the time. Is that too much money? And literally, because if you double that, that means you've halved it, you've doubled it, you've made it full price. $264 million to give every person in New Zealand free transport permanently forever. Is that too much?
I don't think it would stay that way, though, because it would be so popular. It would be more people would do it, and it would be more expensive than that. I think subsidizing to a point where it's quite cheap is the way forward. Where was it? It was really cheap. Even though it was kind of terrifying, I got the bus in LA, and that is actually quite a scary endeavor. And it was 25 cents. And this was in 2008. I was going to see the Flight of the Conchords in downtown LA, which is actually quite a scary place. And I was on and it was 25 cents. And I just couldn't, that just blew my mind. So I think some cheap, and things like getting the train from the Toronto airport to Toronto is only about $16 or something like that. And so everybody does that. That's still actually quite new. Hasn't been there that long. It's called the GO train, I believe. So when you have things that are really affordable, I don't think it has to be free, but I think a hefty subsidy is a really good idea, because, a train can be bloody $7-8 one way or something like that. And that just really adds up on your weekly commute.
Jack Johnson, my favorite artist, Upside Down, love that song. Buses were a lot more packed last week, and I found I saved a lot of money.
Fantastic. Jack. So I just love that. I love it. I just hope they keep it in. I really do. I really do.
I think my gut tells me that if they can afford to keep the tax relief on the petrol, they'll try and do it till after the next election, because it would be an absolute killer to put it in place in the lead up to the election. And then you might find that 6 months after the election, it goes back on. Maybe it goes back on in increments, like 10, then 10, then 5 or something like that.
Well, I mean, haven't they built it into the budget that it goes up every year or something, haven't they? Like,
I'm not sure.
Yeah. I mean, I think that taxing petrol is really important to provide infrastructure and light rail and things like that. But it's just, and the thing is, nobody's happy, as I've said before. Everybody wants climate change to end, but they don't want to have to change their behavior. They don't have to spend anything extra. They want the government to buy all their houses if they're close to the water. Nobody wants to do anything to actually make it happen, but we all have to.
I think it's a really easy solution for the tax on the petrol. The numbers have all jumped out of my head because I live in the now, and I can't remember what I read 3 weeks ago. But whatever it was, we were paying, whatever it was, $2 a litre or a buck. Let's say half and half. We were paying $1.25 or $1.50 a litre for fuel, because it was 50% tax or whatever it was. That means if fuel's $1 a litre, you're paying 50 cents in tax. If fuel's $2 a litre, you're paying $1 in tax. So I reckon you just cap it. So in other words, you make the maximum tax you can pay $1 a litre. And then whatever the extra price on top of it goes up and up and up. That's not changing the tax take. There's no extra cost to the government if a litre of fuel costs $2.30 versus $2 versus $1.80. So if they just cap the tax at a reasonable amount, like $1 a litre, then whether it's $5 a litre or whether it's $1.80 a litre, they're getting the same tax take. Because as I said, I don't see how a $5 litre of petrol, God please no, versus a $3 litre of petrol costs the government anything more. It gains them more tax, but there's no outgoings or anything more. So why don't they just cap the tax and leave it at that, have that, rather than being a proportion, being a solid amount, and then that's what it always is.
Because they're trying to deter people from using petrol.
But they're not doing that with tax. I think that's I mean what they do with, if they wanted to do that though, they should be upping it. Why are they downing it?
Or because of all the other inflationary pressures at the same time. That's why they did that. Like if it was just in isolation, like as it has been before, they haven't taken it off before.
And how did they get people off cigarettes? As they made them like $12 a packet tax. You had to pay $25. That's how you do it. You don't do it by 10 cents here and 10 cents there. So if that was actually the reason they were doing it, they should make tax $4 a litre. And then people are going to get out of their cars and get on public transport.
But then they're also going to acknowledge the fact that there's a lot less choice. So that's why I think the incremental way of doing it is a better way. Because like for smoking, it's easy. It's not easy. I don't know. I've never smoked, but I've seen enough to realize it's quite hard to quit. But the alternative is no quit. Whereas the alternative to petrol is a lot more complicated.
Free EVs for everyone. That's what I say. See if National will bring it out. That's what the Greens will bring out. Free EVs. I'll have a little Hyundai Sonic, please. I like those. I've seen those a few times on my YouTube feeds recently. I'm happy with that. I don't need no flipping Tesla. Little Hyundai will do me fine. I'll be good with that.
Okay.
All right. Hey, we're wrapping up. George, you going to come back in and say goodbye, or are you going to just stay there in the background vaping and drinking alcohol?
I'm here. I have been reading the Commerce Commission's report into supermarkets and trying to get my head around how this all works. It's quite rewarding, actually, once you get your head around it and just realize how sort of bullshit it is.
The duopoly, how bullshit the duopoly is.
Yeah. How we have these politicians, in both the left and right centre, espousing the benefits of competitive capitalism, and in reality, we don't have competitive capitalism. We have this.
As I say, spend some time in a licensing trust area, and you realise that view.
Well, I do think there's an interesting conversation at some stage to have, not to have today, but so often. I'm not saying it's all of the left, and I don't want to like pigeonhole it, but we hear the left that, this capitalist idea of competition and, a fair marketplace is the way to go forward, yada, 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 especially in America. Whereas what we're saying about the supermarkets is what we need is competition and a fair marketplace. It's interesting that it's a similar argument that often gets rejected by many people, which is now being asked for by many people in that industry. So I'm interested to investigate.
Well, from my perspective, I'm just calling them on their bullshit, right? That it's not actually the capitalism that they seem to espouse, that it's corporate dictatorship, really. If it was the capitalism that they hold as their ideal, I would be critiquing that just all the same.
Yeah. Because their competition is only in name only, really, because it's almost like price fixing, isn't it, between the two of them? It's almost collusion, but yet I guess they stop short of that. Otherwise, they'd be charged with that. But
well, yeah, I mean, it's amazing reading this and just seeing how both horizontally and vertically integrated the wholesale and retail part is, and the sort of domination that the two companies hold over that, and realizing that suppliers, like, for example, Waddies, are in this really difficult situation. So, yeah, slowly getting my head more around this issue, which I'm sure we'll be returning to at some stage.
look forward to a presentation from you at a future day.
The PowerPoint will be what the day after. Well, next week we're moving this whole show to 10 p.m. and I think Monday is budget day, isn't it, George? So probably Monday night.
The 19th, whenever that is, yeah.
Oh, that's Wednesday. I think it might be Wednesday.
Thursday. Yeah.
Thursday. Okay. So I was wrong with that. But yeah, maybe Thursday night we'll have a PowerPoint by George. And, if it's good, we can put it up on the fridge with a magnet on it afterwards. And if it's not, we can ignore it altogether. I don't know.
Okay.
Thanks, Penny. Thanks for coming on again today. I've enjoyed chatting as always very much. George, thanks for all that work you've done in the background, especially bringing up Fat Thor, because that's my highlight of the show as well. And other than that, remember, if you're joining us today, we're currently live streaming from midday for this week. And as I just said, from next week, we're actually going to do it at 10 o'clock at night, just to see if there's a different vibe to it, if people would be more interested in these kinds of conversations at nighttime. We're just having a bit of a play. So thanks, Penny. Thanks, George. Thank you for joining us. And we'll see you tomorrow from midday here in Big Hairy News. All right.